Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court, and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common-sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.
7 things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Jamie East, and this is the Sunday 7.
I'm Jamie East, and on today's episode of the award-winning Sunday 7 in association with Metro, we hear about plans to expand space for zoos, we meet a food futurologist, and catch up with Butch Sunni. Plus, Will Guyatt, the Smart 7's resident tech guru, has the latest on Elon Musk's exit from politics and some intriguing news on the Switch too. If you're enjoying these episodes, please do like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We're here 7 days a week at 7 a.m. with the 7 biggest stories on the Smart 7 in association with Metro. But before we get started, it was on this day in 1946 that TV licences were first issued in Britain. They cost £2 and included radio, and you could buy yours at the local post office. Interestingly, TV was paused during World War II, cutting off in 1939 in the middle of a Mickey Mouse cartoon as war was declared. When the TV was turned back on in June 1946, the first programme broadcast was the very same cartoon. That must have taken them ages to make. As the world of work changes with the advent of AI and ever more powerful computer and robot systems, job titles are getting an upgrade too. Maybe you'd like to be Chief Robot Whisperer or a Software Ninjaneer. Well, we're certainly seeing jobs like Futurologist more often, a title perhaps pioneered by James Cridland, who's been styling himself a radio and audio futurologist for some time. He's the man behind podcast newsletter Pod News. But this week saw a food futurologist step forward, Dr. Morgaine Gaye, with some thoughts on how food's going to change in the modern era. She's got a PhD in quantum philosophy and describes her work as looking for disruptive anomalies. She says we may soon live in a post-hunger world and that instead of sugar, texture could be the next big craving. She spoke to the BBC this week about what we should be watching out for and why some of the essential foodstuff of today, like onions, potatoes and apples, might disappear.
Things like oats and potatoes have been something that's really well adjusted to our climate. But because of climate change, that's going to shift. So they'll become more expensive. Certain onions, like perhaps spring onions, might grow easily. But we'll be heading towards the things like the citrus fruits and nuts and olives and even grapes and having much more British wine. So those things will be cheaper and more readily available.
Our shift in diet, driven by climate change, might even be more radical though, as the search for an environmentally friendly protein source could lead us to insects.
The issue we have a few issues. One, it's the socialisation for us around eating insects. Creepy crawlies, it's disgusting, we don't want anything to do with it. The second thing is that there's the novel foods in Britain. There's a lot of legislation around foods that we haven't socialised around, which are not legal, and most insects are those, because you can get anaphylactic shock from some insects like peanuts, but if you've never had the insect you would never know. So they're not that readily available to us anyway, even if we wanted to have them. But we can get cricket, we can get mealworms, and some of that is in some sort of insect bars and things like that. But generally, I think culturally, we won't adapt to that.
It's not just the types of food that'll change in the future. As we've seen from the impact of weight loss drugs like Ozempic, Big Pharma may also have a dramatic effect on our physical appetite and desires. Dr. David Kessler is a former commissioner with the US Food and Drug Administration, and he also served as chief science officer for the US COVID response team, including Operation Warp Speed. He's got a new book out called Diet, Drugs and Dopamine, which takes a serious look at what the impact of these drugs may mean. He's warning that only 15% of Americans are metabolically healthy and that the UK isn't far behind, with belly fat, or what he calls sick fat, one of the primary concerns.
The problem is not weight. right? It's not how big you are or small you are. The problem is that sick fat that collects at our midsection that gets into our liver, our pancreas, and our heart. But we can reverse that. Let me explain to you how these drugs work. They delay gastric emptying. Food stays in your stomach longer. They take you to that edge of nausea. And what's strong enough to overcome that addiction? You've had the flu, you have food poisoning, you know you don't want to eat. There's no magic to these pills.
It's tough being the planet's richest man. Well, tough's a relative term, I guess, but Elon Musk has certainly been going through some things recently. Trump seems to have fallen out of love with him, and if ever a man loved billionaires, it's our dear friend Donald. Tesla shareholders are kicking off, and his SpaceX rocket just exploded for the third time in a row. All in all, doesn't sound too good, does it? When it comes to the mysterious world of Mars fan Musk, there's only one man we can call, and that's the Smart 7's tech guru, Will Guyatt. Will, here we are again. Hope you're well, mate. Where did it all go wrong for poor old Elon then?
We all wondered how long this bromance would last, and now we know it was 128 days. Despite getting a bedroom next to the president and much public whooping and hollering, everyone is seemingly backing away from each other as Musk leaves the tent. It's not been rosy for a while. He's clearly upset that the president backed OpenAI boss Sam Altman to develop some AI projects for the government and not his businesses, as well as Musk seemingly dissing Trump's policies for stopping him from making Doge a real success. He also recently called Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarro a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks. For a short while, many of us wondered whether Musk could win and eventually be some kind of new US president, but right now, in this game of 9-dimensional multiverse chess, he's the loser.
My money's on the bricks. Has he actually quit politics, though?
Was Elon ever really in politics? This is where it actually gets quite confusing, particularly when his Department of Government Efficiency wasn't actually a real government department. Whatever has happened, he's really clearly signalled that he's backing away and has been granted some kind of weird victory lap from the president, most likely to signal to the investors in his businesses that he's turning his attentions back to the things they pay him for and ultimately mark his homework on, despite him being the world's richest person.
But Doge didn't really save anywhere near what it promised, did it?
Once again, everyone associated with Musk and the president and the two gents themselves have been patting themselves heavily on the back. But let's consider Musk told us that he was going to cut $2 trillion of government expenditure, and last month claims to have saved on average over $10 billion a week, which is more money than you'll find down the back of my sofa. But before leaving this job, he said that $1 trillion would be cut from the government budget by September, and most of the work he could do was done. A 50% cut on $2 trillion is an eye-watering amount of cash that he hasn't saved. Just to add a little bit more confusion into the mix, Doge has an online wall of receipts, which currently says there's been estimated savings of $175 billion since Trump came back into power. Now, it might seem like sour grapes to diss someone for only saving the government such what is still a huge amount of money, but the truth matters, and there have been huge amounts of disruption and lives turned over to reach these numbers.
The Democrats must be relieved, right?
They will definitely feel relieved that the president hasn't ignored US law by letting Musk overstay the legal 130-day term he was allowed as a special government employee. It was a complete mess. Many US officials of all political persuasions will be relieved that this is now over.
But in terms of his own companies, how much risk is he facing at Tesla?
Despite growing unhappiness from a number of larger investors in Tesla, I still believe it's possible for Elon to ride this out if they believe he's doing less government work, playing fewer video games, and not interfering in international elections via X. Right now, Tesla sales are the lowest they've been in 3 years and collapsed almost 50% year on year, and the company's share price and profits have also literally tanked. Musk, of course, blamed this on those who wanted to attack him and the Doge team, ignoring the fact he'd absolutely taken his eye off the ball. The firm has huge competition globally, and the problems they face at Tesla continue to mount. Let's see if Elon really knuckles down.
And will NASA be concerned about SpaceX? They've got real-life astronauts waiting for a SpaceX trip to the moon, haven't they?
The SpaceX explosions are damaging for Elon's reputation, but given NASA had real-life problems of its own with space shuttles and the ability to publicly fund its ambitious plans, it looks as though the company is still right there in the American space program. And that's largely because the company still has a wealth of real experts behind Elon himself, who probably has more to say about the colour of the rocket and the spacesuit than what actually goes on in them. The public reputation of SpaceX has been harmed too, according to a survey on visible US brands, but nowhere near as much as Tesla has. There will be many in the US government hoping that Musk's retreat from the White House puts all this back on track and they can finally get to the moon.
I've never really thought about that. You never see a red space rocket, do you? In cheery news, and I'm going to file this under news I didn't even know existed, WhatsApp's finally gotten around to developing an app for the iPad. No rush there. It's a bit weird, isn't it?
When I first read this, I felt like I was back in 2014, but then I suddenly remembered they'd never released an official version of the world's most popular messaging app until now, which is just bonkers when you consider it's practically available on everything, including your nan's tea maker and your dad's Nokia. It's never been entirely clear why they didn't release a version. Some speculated because WhatsApp initially used your phone number to verify your account and that not all iPads used a SIM card. Others suggested it was because WhatsApp was built for a smaller phone screen and not the massive comparable real estate of an iPad. Now, since you've been able to access a web version on your computer for 5 years or so, it seemed like this would never turn up, and then it suddenly arrived. But for many in the world, wasn't 2014 a far simpler time?
Speak for yourself, I still have 3 kids at school. And finally, mate, we're less than a week away from the new Nintendo Switch. Give us the juicy rumours, fella.
Considering Switch 2 isn't even out until next Thursday almost internationally, that hasn't stopped a number of gamers getting their hands on consoles early and leaking whatever they can online, despite the fact that the Switch 2 seemingly can't even play games right now until a day one online update gets made available. An interesting surprise this week for gamers who like puzzles and strategy titles is that Switch 2 will be fully compatible with your actual computer mouse, to the extent you can even plug in a USB one. This is likely to open the console to a ton of strategy game releases. Whatever happens, it's going to be a big launch, and it looks like it will be a technical sellout for Nintendo on day one, with just one retailer in the UK and Ireland, Smith's Toys, saying they're going to keep a limited amount of consoles available in each store for an old school midnight opening, which is rare now, given that so many of us purchase our games digitally. Game, the largest dedicated retailer left in the space in the UK, have mysteriously cancelled a load of pre-orders, but have now promised to reinstate as many as possible before launch. That sounds chaotic. Taking a leaf out of my boy Elon Musk's book, by this time next week, I'm going to be the best player anywhere on Mario Kart World. Mark my words.
Will, that's fighting talk. I'm throwing a virtual banana skin in front of you right now. Speak to you next week, mate. Still to come on the Sunday 7 in association with Metro. Butch and Sunni bounce back from space and why COVID could become a concern all over again. Oh no. We talked about Elon Musk and his SpaceX project just a moment ago, and he's a key part of NASA's Project Artemis, which is intended to see humans land on the moon once again in mid-2027. The original plan was for NASA to make use of both SpaceX and Boeing's new Starliner vehicle to accelerate plans for the next phase of space exploration. That plan has, however, stalled with the shambles that saw 2 NASA astronauts stranded in space for 9 months instead of 8 days. The Starliner was intended to be the new version of the space shuttle, but on its first manned mission, it had difficulty docking with the International Space Station and eventually had to return to Earth empty and on automatic mode. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams eventually returned to Earth courtesy of SpaceX, and they've spent 45 days undergoing an intense regime of physiotherapy and training to get used to living in a normal gravity environment, and they haven't enjoyed it that much either.
Pulling G's for 30 plus years, I got some issues in my neck. I can't turn my head all the way, but in space that goes away. You don't have any stress on your body, no problem with my neck. We're still floating in the capsule in the ocean, and my neck starts hurting while we're still hadn't even been extracted yet. So anyway, gravity stinks for a period, and that period varies for different people, but eventually you get over that nervous-vestibular balance type of issues, and then your back is not used to holding up your structure. The muscles tense up.
So that was really the first month to 45 days of that, and then we graduated and, back to normal. And I felt, though, honestly, I was still tired. Like all the little muscles are getting re-engaged, and so it kept me not being able to wake up like I normally like to wake up early in the morning until about a week and a half ago. Then I'm like up at 4 a.m. I'm like, aha, I'm back. So, I think all of that just takes a little while to get back to gravity. Just like Butch said, it's just a little bit of a readaptation.
Now, while we're used to people complaining about the pace of construction and the new government has pledged to build to ease the housing crisis, there are some serious issues facing the building industry worldwide. We're facing a shortage of sand, which is obviously an essential ingredient for things like concrete and asphalt and even glass for smartphone screens. And it's not just any sand, desert sand won't do. The industry is currently using 3 times more sand than the planet can produce. So there's been a new focus on bringing a more circular economy to the construction industry, reusing materials and finding alternatives to things like sandbags. There's also a wider focus on lowering carbon emissions, and that's where reusing existing materials comes in. Dr. Sam Chapman is co-founder and executive director of a Scottish company called Kenoteq, who've developed a way to create bricks out of recycled materials, which could have a significant impact.
Construction industry is currently a very large impactor on carbon emissions globally, but the K-brick can really help towards reducing the embodied carbon associated with new projects.
Lucy Black is Kenoteq's head of business development, and she says the K-bricks mean that there's no need for new excavation for materials, and that could have a huge impact on the carbon footprint of construction.
Through using recycled materials and a very low carbon, low energy production process which involves no firing, we have a unique product, but one that performs technically like a traditional building brick.
Still to come on the Sunday 7 in association with Metro, good news for zoos, hooray, and bad news for vaccine fans, boo.
Right after this.
If you're a parent or share a fridge with someone, Instacart is about to make grocery shopping so much easier. Because with family carts, you can share a cart with your partner and each add the items you want. Since between the two of you, odds are you'll both remember everything you need. And this way, you'll never have to eat milkless cereal again. So minimize the stress of the weekly shop with family carts. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days. Excludes restaurants.
Welcome back.
It's been 5 years since the pandemic and lockdowns. The latest worry has been more about bird flu than COVID-19, but it seems like COVID might not be done with us yet. A new variant of Omicron, which is labelled NB181, has been spreading quickly across both Australia and Asia, which has seen the World Health Organization flag it as a variant they're closely monitoring. While the new variant hasn't shown any sign of more severe symptoms, it does appear as though it's able to sidestep immunity from previous infections. All told, probably not the best week to be American, as 2 major changes were announced under Trump's new health secretary, notorious vaccine skeptic Robert Kennedy Jr. His department cancelled the $600 million contract with the Moderna this week, which was aimed at developing a bird flu vaccine, and he and his team were also turning their attention to COVID.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, Dr. Molly O'Shea is a spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics, and she's concerned at the shift away from the previous scientifically based clinical guidance.
Children and pregnant people are particularly vulnerable to COVID illness. COVID vaccine is safe and it's effective, and it's a much safer way to learn the immunity of COVID. This decision was made without any input from the typical groups that provide guidance to the FDA around vaccination decision making. And as far as I can recall, and I've been in practice over 30 years, that sort of process has not been undertaken before.
We live in a world where it's increasingly hard to tell what's real, well, on social media at least. Between the scary new capabilities of AI in video or the continual efforts of bad actors on social media, it's a battle to understand what's actually happening. We've seen the impact of that in the real world just this week, when Merseyside police rush-released details on the suspect in the Liverpool incident, partly to quell the online speculation over what had happened and whether or not it was a terror attack. So, what's the best strategy for dealing with online misinformation and disinformation? Well, Marcus Beard is a former digital counter-misinformation strategist for the UK government, and he spoke to Radio 4 this week.
A crisis is a bit like, you find your house is on fire, but disinformation is like someone has set your house on fire and they are continuing to pour fuel on it, and it gets bigger and bigger. So what you need is a strategic approach and to understand, well, why are people sharing this stuff? It's not just because it's happened and it's got out of control. It's being deliberately seeded by people, deliberately amplified, possibly by states, often by people just trying to make money, and it is playing off biases that people already have. It's trying to get an emotional reaction out of people.
The days of going to the circus to watch bears dance or men put their heads in lions' mouths are long gone, partly for animal welfare reasons, but also because it's clearly a health and safety issue, not least for the lion. But while circuses have evolved, there's been a long-running campaign from animal rights activists about how animals are treated in zoos and aquariums. Now, the government's moved to change the law and better protect animals who live in captivity by doing things like dramatically enlarging the amount of space the animals have to live in and banning the tethering of large birds of prey. Jamie Christen is the CEO of Chester Zoo.
We are going to be increasing the size of our outdoor elephant space by about 3 times over the course of the next few years. It's no surprise to us. We knew this was going to happen. Already got plans in place, and a evolving major conservation zoo like Chester is exactly what we want to do anyway.
Ros Clubb is the head of wild animal science and policy at the RSPCA, and she's pleased to see concrete steps taken to protect zoo dwellers. I'm assuming not actual concrete steps.
It's very welcome that there's more space requirements for elephants, but really a huge overhaul is needed if there's a chance of meeting the needs of these elephants. We're still seeing really serious welfare problems with high death rates, low birth rates, a lot of health and welfare problems. So the RSPCA really challenges whether that's actually even feasible.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.
Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common-sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.